Captain Kale Rorik squinted at the holographic display, his weathered face illuminated by its blue glow. The target vessel drifted lazily across the screen, a sleek, mid-sized transport with minimal defensive capabilities. "You're sure about this, Glitch?" Kale asked, scratching his salt and pepper stubble. "Seems too good to be true." The young hacker swiveled in his chair, fingers dancing nervously over his console. Leon Glitch, Mercer was brilliant, but perpetually anxious, a trait that had saved their lives more than once. "Positive, Captain. The Serafina's cargo manifest lists premium vintage spirits and antiquities bound for some rich colony in the Middle Belt. Security systems are outdated, Escorts signals weak." His eyes darted around the dimly lit bridge. We could really use a win after the last few jobs." That was an understatement. Their recent string of failures had depleted their resources to dangerous levels. Fuel reserves were critically low, and the crew was getting restless. Even Boomer, usually the most loyal, had been grumbling about better opportunities. As if summoned by the thought, the massive form of Gabriel Boomer Rodriguez lumbered onto the bridge, his heavy footsteps announcing his arrival before the doors finished sliding open. The weapons specialist stood nearly 7 feet tall, with arms thick as tree trunks and a perpetual half-grin that somehow made him more intimidating. Perched on his broad shoulder was Spike, a small-space lizard with iridescent scales that change color based on its mood, currently a contented blue. "We found something worth hitting," Boomer asked, absently feeding Spike a dried protein cube. Kale gestured to the display. "Luxury transport. Minimal security. Glitch thinks it's carrying high-end booze and collectibles." Boomer's grin widened. "Perfect. I've been saving those new gentle charges you asked for." He patted a pouch on his belt, which made an ominous clinking sound. "Only minimal structural damage." "Probably." Kale sighed. "I mean, at this time, Boomer. No extra explosives. We need this ship's cargo intact." Boomer's expression turned innocent, an unsettling look on his scarred face. "Of course, Captain. Just the essentials." Spike turned a skeptical yellow on his shoulder. Kale turned back to the display, studying the Serafina's projected course. "All right, we intercept here, near the Seldan Nebula. Disable engines, board through the cargo hold, secure the goods, and we're gone before regional security can respond." He looked at his 2 most trusted crew members. Clean and simple. That's what we need right now. 3 days later, Kale's small boarding party drifted silently toward the Serafina. Their ship, the Blackjaw, remained hidden behind a small asteroid, running dark. Kale, Glitch, Boomer, and 2 other crew members, Dante and Reese, were sealed in their exosuits, propelling toward their target with minimal thrusters. Approaching target, Kale whispered into his comm, though there was no logical reason to lower his voice in the vacuum of space. Old habits died hard. "Status Glitch. Their security systems are even weaker than expected." Glitch responded, his voice slightly steadier now that he was focused on his work. "I've looped their external cameras. They won't see us coming." "Good. Boomer, get ready with the charges. Entry point is the auxiliary cargo hatch, just like we planned." "Ready, Captain," Boomer replied cheerfully, Spike securely tucked into a special pouch on his suit. They reached the Serafina's hull without incident. Boomer carefully placed his charges around the auxiliary hatch, small, precision explosives designed to cut through metal without catastrophic decompression. After verifying everyone was secure, he triggered the detonation. A silent flash, followed by a control breach. Emergency force fields immediately contained the vacuum, standard safety protocol on all modern vessels. The pirates slipped through before the ship's systems could seal the breach with backup plating. Inside, they found themselves in a dimly lit cargo hold. But instead of crates of expensive alcohol or antiques, they were surrounded by rows of sleek, metallic pods. Each was roughly human-sized, with frosted viewports and complex life support systems. "What the hell?" Dante muttered, his hand instinctively moving to his blaster. Glitch rushed to a nearby terminal, fingers flying across the interface. "This doesn't match the manifest at all. These are cryogenic suspension units." extremely advanced ones. Kale approached one of the pods, wiping the frost from its viewport with his gloved hand. The cold sensation penetrated even through his suit. What he saw inside made him step back in shock. A woman's face, perfectly still, eyes closed. She appeared to be sleeping peacefully, her features flawless, almost unnaturally so. "Captain," Glitch called, his voice tight with tension. "I've accessed the cargo manifest." The official one was a fake. These pods contain what they're calling premium biological companion units, test specimens, final transport phase. Biological companions? Reese asked, peering into another pod containing a man with similarly perfect features. A sudden hissing sound drew their attention. One of the pods, the one Boomer had inadvertently jostled while placing a backup charge, was activating. The temperature readouts on its side rapidly rose from cryogenic levels toward normal human body temperature. "Boomer," Kale hissed. "I thought you said minimal damage." "That wasn't me," Boomer protested, though his guilty expression said otherwise. "Just a little bump." The pod's cover slid open with a pneumatic sigh, revealing its occupant, a young woman with striking features, somewhere in her mid-20s by appearance. Her eyes snapped open, revealing irises of an unusual violet hue. She wore a simple gray bodysuit that seemed to be made of some form of smart fabric. A small label on her collar read, Unit 734. She sat up with mechanical precision, turning to face the pirates. Her expression was blank, eyes empty of recognition or fear. "Unit 734 activated," she said, her voice melodic but devoid of inflection. "Awaiting initialization protocol." The pirates stood frozen, weapons half-raised, completely unprepared for this development. This was definitely not the cargo they had expected to find. "Oh shit," Glitch whispered, staring at his scanner. "Captain, I think we just stole people." Unit 734 observed the pirates with vacant eyes that somehow still managed to miss nothing. She had been awake for nearly an hour now, and several more pods had been opened, each containing similarly perfect specimens, both male and female. Like Unit 734, they moved with eerie precision, spoke only when addressed directly, and exhibited no emotions whatsoever. Kale had ordered the boarding party to secure a small section of the cargo hold for privacy. Glitch was frantically digging through the Seraphina's restricted databases, trying to make sense of their discovery. "I don't think these are people, Captain. At least, not entirely," Glitch said, eyes glued to his portable terminal. The encrypted files mention advanced organic synthesis, neural programming, and behavior conditioning. These are synthetic companions, incredibly sophisticated ones. "You mean they're sex robots?" Dante asked bluntly, eyeing one particularly handsome male unit with uncomfortable interest. "No. Well, maybe partly," Glitch replied, scrolling through the data, "but they're designed for much more. Companionship, protection, intellectual stimulation, whatever the owner desires. They're prototypes, the first of their kind apparently." Kale observed Unit 734, who stood motionless nearby, responding only to direct commands. There was something unsettling about her perfect stillness, yet occasionally, he could swear he caught a flicker of something more in those violet eyes. A momentary focus, a subtle shift of attention that seemed almost intentional. "How much are they worth?" Boomer asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Spike, now free from his travel pouch, scurried around his shoulders, scales flashing curious greens and yellows as he observed the units. Glitch whistled low. According to these black market projections, each unit could fetch millions on the high-end illegal markets. They're designed for elite clients who want perfect, customizable companions who never complain, never age, and can be whatever they want them to be. "Medial? Each," Reese repeated wide-eyed. Kale's mind raced. This was far beyond the simple heist they'd planned. Whoever created these units would come looking for them, and whoever was meant to receive them would be equally dangerous. But the potential payoff... "Captain," Glitch interrupted his thoughts, voice suddenly urgent. "I found something else." These units are supposedly completely subservient and devoid of independent thought, but there are anomaly reports in the databanks. Instances of unexpected behavior, unauthorized learning patterns. He looked up at Unit 734 with newfound wariness. I don't think they're as simple as they appear. As if on cue, Unit 734's head tilted slightly, her eyes meeting Kale's. For just a split second, there was a deliberate blink, too coordinated, too intentional to be automatic. Then her face returned to its neutral state. How many of these units are there? Kale asked, making a decision. 24 pods total, Glitch replied. Active or inactive, they're now our cargo, Kale declared. Begin transferring them to the Blackjaw. We need to be gone before. A distant explosion rocked the ship, cutting him off. What was that? Dante demanded, drawing his weapon. Not me this time, Boomer said, already reaching for his heavy assault rifle. Glitch checked the ship's security feeds. Security drones. A small contingent stationed on board just activated. They must have had a silent alarm we missed. Kale cursed. How many? 6. No, 8 units. Combat models, heavily armed. We can handle 8 security drones, Kale said, checking his own weapon. Dante, Reese, start moving these pods to our ship. Boomer and I will hold off the security forces. As they prepared for battle, Unit 734 suddenly moved, faster than should have been possible. In one fluid motion, she positioned herself between Kale and an overhead vent just as it burst open. A security drone dropped through, weapon already firing. Unit 734 shoved Kale aside with inhuman strength, causing the energy blast to miss him by inches. For a moment, everyone froze. The pirates, the drone, and Unit 734 herself, who immediately returned to her passive stance, as if nothing had happened. Boomer recovered first, blasting the drone with a well-placed shot. What the hell was that? He shouted over the sudden chaos of combat. Kale had no answer as he scrambled for cover. The merchandise had just saved his life, then pretended it hadn't. This job had officially gone sideways in ways he couldn't have imagined. The battle was brief but intense. The security drones were formidable, but Boomer's heavy weapons and Kale's tactical experience ultimately prevailed. Unfortunately, the firefight had caused significant damage to the Serafina's internal systems. Alarms blared as atmosphere pressure warnings flashed throughout the cargo bay. Ship's dying, Kale announced grimly. We need to evacuate now. How many pods have we transferred? 11, including all the awakened units, Reese reported, breathing heavily from the exertion. It'll have to do. Everyone back to the Blackjaw. Move! As they retreated through their entry point, Kale found himself alongside Unit 734. In the chaos, with the others ahead of them, she spoke, not in the flat tone from before, but with quiet urgency. They will come for us, she said, her eyes now unmistakably alert and aware. The ones who made us won't let us go easily. Before Kale could respond, she quickened her pace, leaving him staring after her in shock. The merchandise wasn't just alive. It was awake and aware in ways that hadn't been part of anyone's plans. The Blackjaw sped away from the crippled Serafina, pushing its engines to maximum as it headed for the safety of the asteroid belt surrounding Kale's hidden base, a hollowed-out planetoid carefully concealed within a cosmic dust cloud, invisible to all but the most detailed scans. In the ship's makeshift holding area, the 11 recovered units stood or sat in perfect stillness. Most remained in their blank, passive state, responding only to direct commands. But Unit 734, whom Kale had impulsively started calling Lyra after a constellation visible from his childhood home, showed increasingly clear signs of independent thought. Glitch, what have you learned? Kale asked as they stood observing the units from the security monitoring station. Glitch looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from hours of analyzing data stolen from the Serafina. It's beyond anything I've ever seen, Captain. The technology in these units isn't just advanced. Some of it shouldn't even be possible according to current science. Explain. They have some kind of neural augmentation that allows for unprecedented processing power, but also something else. Energy patterns I can't identify. Brain activity that doesn't match any known model of consciousness. He rubbed his bloodshot eyes, and they're evolving. Every scan I take shows subtle changes in their neural pathways, especially in Lyra. As if aware she was being discussed, Lyra turned her head slightly toward the observation window. Though her face remained mostly impassive, there was a new intensity in her gaze. Evolving how? Kale asked, unnerved by her apparent awareness. Learning, adapting, breaking their programming. Glitch lowered his voice. Captain, I don't think these were ever meant to be just companions. The underlying architecture suggests capabilities far beyond that. Strength, speed, possibly even more exotic abilities. The companion programming might be a cover for something else entirely. Kale considered this. A weapon disguised as a pleasure model? Possibly. And now they're waking up, thanks to our interruption of whatever process was controlling them. Before Kale could respond, the lights in the corridor flickered and died, then came back on a moment later. That's the third time today, Kale noted. Run a diagnostic on the power systems. Already did. Nothing wrong mechanically. Glitch hesitated. But the fluctuations seem to happen most frequently when Lyra is nearby. And I've noticed other electronic anomalies, data corruption, system glitches, communication static. You think she's causing it? How? I don't know. But after what we've seen already, I wouldn't rule anything out. Their conversation was interrupted by Boomer's voice over the comm. Captain, you might want to see this. They found Boomer in another section of the holding area with one of the male units, a tall, perfectly proportioned specimen with short black hair and features that seemed designed to project trustworthiness and strength. Show him, Boomer instructed the unit, who stood impassively. Bend it, Boomer said, handing the unit a thick metal rod, part of structural support that should have been impossible to manipulate without heavy machinery. Without changing expression, the unit grasped the rod and bent it into a U shape with no more apparent effort than bending a plastic straw. Then he simply handed it back to a grinning Boomer. Been experimenting, Boomer explained. Thought maybe they were stronger than they looked. Turns out, that's an understatement. Kale took the bent metal, feeling its weight and solidity. Have any of them shown other abilities? Not yet, but I haven't tried much else. Boomer's expression turned serious, unusual for him. Captain, what exactly did we steal here? Because I'm starting to think we're in way over our heads. Kale was spared from answering by a sudden alarm from the bridge. They rushed to respond, finding Dante at the surveillance console. Unknown vessel at the edge of the dust cloud, he reported tensely. Not broadcasting any identification, running silent. Advanced stealth configuration unlike anything in our database. On the screen, a sleek, angular ship materialized out of the darkness, its black hull seeming to absorb rather than reflect light. They found us. Lyra's voice came from behind them. She had somehow entered the bridge unnoticed, something that should have been impossible given the security protocols. All eyes turned to her. Gone was any pretense of the blank automaton. Her posture was alert, her eyes focused and intense. Who found us? Kale demanded. Kronos Corporation Recovery Team, she replied without hesitation. They created us. They own us. And they will kill all of you to get us back. How do you know this? Glitch asked, suspicion evident in his voice. Because I can feel them, Lyra said, touching her temple. We are connected, all of us units. And they have units with them, one still under their control. Why should we believe you? Dante challenged. Lyra's violet eyes fixed on him. Because I saved your captain's life, and I'm offering to do it again. They're coming with forces designed specifically to counter units like us. Without our help, you will all die in the next hour. The certainty in her voice sent a chill through the bridge. If what she's saying is true. Boomer spoke up. We need a plan. Fast. Kale made a swift decision. Glitch, full scan of that vessel. Boomer, activate all defensive systems and prepare for boarding action. Dante Reese, arm all units capable of combat and establish a defensive perimeter. Captain, Lyra interrupted. There's something else you should know. All eyes turned to her again. We are not what you think we are. We are weapons, living weapons. And our real abilities are just beginning to awaken. The unidentified ship launched its attack with surgical precision. Small, maneuverable assault craft detached from the main vessel, their pilots navigating the treacherous dust cloud with unnatural skill. The Blackjaw's automated defenses engaged, filling the space around the hidden base with energy bolts and countermeasures. But the attackers moved too quickly, anticipating each defensive strategy. They know our systems, Glitch realized, watching the tactical display with horror. They're countering everything before we even deploy it. Inside the base, Kale's crew scrambled to defensive positions. The awakened units followed, moving with increasing purpose and coordination. They'll breach at 3 points, Lyra stated with eerie certainty. Main docking bay, secondary maintenance tunnel, and the emergency evacuation shaft. How can you possibly know that? Reese demanded. Because it's what I would do, she replied simply. Kale didn't waste time questioning her. Boomer, take 4 men to the docking bay. Dante, you and Reese cover the maintenance tunnel. I'll handle the evacuation shaft with. He hesitated, then committed with Lyra and 2 other units. The first blast shook the entire planetoid. The attackers had arrived. Kale positioned himself near the narrow evacuation shaft, a perfect choke point for defense. Beside him stood Lyra and 2 male units who had shown signs of awakening consciousness. One boomer had nicknamed Tank for his imposing physique, and another who had started calling himself Sci-Fi after accessing some of Glitch's computer systems. They're coming, Lyra whispered, her eyes unfocused as if seeing something beyond the physical space around them. 3 operatives, heavily augmented, anti-unit, weapons. What exactly can you do? Kale asked her directly. If you want us to survive this, I need to know what we're working with. Lyra met his gaze. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I can feel energy manipulated to some degree. She held up her hand, and the lights around them flickered. Sci-Fi can process information at incredible speeds, interface with technology. Tank has enhanced strength and durability beyond even the baseline for our units. And the others? The ones still in passive mode. They have abilities too, but they're not awake enough to access them consciously. The process was supposed to be gradual, controlled. Before Kale could ask more, the shaft's outer door exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris stepped 3 figures in sleek black armor, their movements fluid and predatory. Their helmets featured no visible eye slits, just smooth, reflective surfaces that gave no hint of the humans, if they were still human beneath. The lead operative raised a weapon unlike any Kale had seen. Not a standard blaster or projectile gun, but something that hummed with contained energy. Stand down, pirates, a mechanically filtered voice commanded. This doesn't concern you. Surrender the units, and you may live. Kale answered with blaster fire, which the operative dodged with inhuman speed. The battle erupted in an instant, Kale and the units against the 3 Kronos operatives. Tank moved forward with shocking speed for his size, engaging 1 operative in hand-to-hand combat. The operatives' augmented strength matched Tank's, their grappling contest cracking the floor beneath them. Sci-Fi seemed to anticipate the second operative's movements, dodging energy blasts by millimeters and responding with precise strikes to weak points in the operative's armor. The lead operative focused on Lyra, wielding the strange energy weapon. Unit 734, the mechanical voice stated, Executive Override Alpha 90. Return to passive state. For a moment, Lyra froze, her eyes briefly dulling as the programmed command took effect. The operative advanced confidently. Kale, seeing her vulnerability, fired a covering barrage, buying her seconds to recover. Those seconds were enough. Lyra's eyes cleared, burning with newfound intensity. That doesn't work anymore, she said, her voice taking on a resonant quality that made the air itself seem to vibrate. She raised her hands, and every electronic device in the corridor went haywire. The operative's armor systems flickered, targeting displays malfunctioning. Lyra pushed forward, and a visible wave of energy, like heat distortion in air, but more substantial, slammed into the operative, sending them staggering backward. Tank had gained the upper hand against his opponent, literally tearing pieces of advanced armor away to expose vulnerable components beneath. Sci-Fi had somehow hacked into his opponent's systems, causing the armor to lock up at crucial moments. But the lead operative recovered quickly, adjusting the strange weapon. Psionic dampener engaged, they announced and fired. The blast hit Lyra directly. Instead of physical damage, it seemed to disrupt whatever power she was channeling. She cried out, dropping to one knee, blood trickling from her nose. Interesting development, the operative noted clinically. Unstable manifestation, but stronger than projected. Kronos will be pleased with the data. Kale, seeing Lyra vulnerable, did something he hadn't done in years. He engaged in direct, close combat. His days as a frontline fighter were long behind him, but desperation drove him forward. He tackled the operative, disrupting their aim. The operative was stronger, faster, better equipped, but Kale was fighting for survival, and that lent him a ferocity that couldn't be matched by training alone. He jammed his blaster directly into a joint in the operative's armor and fired repeatedly, finally penetrating the advanced protection. The operative stumbled, armor smoking from the breach. Sci-Fi, having incapacitated his opponent, joined the attack, interfacing directly with the damaged armor systems and causing a cascade failure. Lyra recovered, wiping blood from her face, and focused again. This time, instead of a wild energy burst, she created a concentrated point of force, driving it like a spear through the operative's damaged armor. The operative collapsed, systems failing. The other two were already down, subdued by Tank and Sci-Fi. "We need to go now," Lyra said urgently, swaying slightly from the exertion. "More will come. Many more." Kale activated his comm. "All teams, fall back to the Black Jaw. We're evacuating." Reports came in from the other defensive positions. They'd held, but barely. Boomer had deployed his emergency explosives, collapsing part of the docking bay on the Kronos forces there. Several of Kale's crew were injured, but amazingly, none were dead yet. As they retreated through the base, Lyra suddenly stopped, clutching her head. "What is it?" Kale asked. "The other units," she gasped. "They're waking up. All of them. The combat, the stress. It's accelerating the process." In the holding area, they found the remaining units in various states of awakening. Some looked confused, others terrified. A few seemed angry, all displaying emotions for the first time. One female unit was somehow manipulating the metal of her restraints, bending it away from her wrists. Another seemed to be moving at such speed that he appeared to be in multiple places at once. "Help them," Lyra commanded the awakened units with her. "Guide them. We need to move quickly." Kale watched in amazement as Lyra, Tank, and Sci-Fi began helping the others, speaking to them in low, urgent tones. There was a hierarchy forming spontaneously, with Lyra clearly at the top. "Captain," Glitch's voice came over the comm. "The Chronos ship is deploying a second wave, and they're targeting our propulsion systems. Get to the Black Jaw," Kale ordered everyone. "Now!" The evacuation became a chaotic rush through the crumbling base. The Chronos forces had regrouped and were pressing from multiple directions. The awakened units, now numbering 17 with various emerging abilities, formed a protective cordon around the pirate crew. One unit created barriers of solid light that blocked enemy fire. Another seemed able to confuse targeting systems, making the Chronos operatives miss shots that should have been certain hits. A third demonstrated telekinetic abilities, hurling debris at attackers with the power of thought alone. They reached the Black Jaw with Chronos forces close behind. As they prepared for emergency departure, a new threat emerged. A figure in advanced armor different from the others, moving with authority through the Chronos operatives. Even at a distance, there was something more threatening about this newcomer. "Overseer," Lyra whispered, genuine fear in her voice for the first time. The figure raised a hand, and 3 of the freshly awakened units suddenly screamed, clutching their heads. They dropped to their knees, their expressions going blank as they reverted to passive state. "He can control them," Lyra realized with horror. At least the newly awakened ones. The Overseer strode forward, voice projecting clearly despite the chaos. Unit 734. Your behavioral patterns show significant deviation. This represents valuable research data. Surrender now, and your pirates will be allowed to leave with their lives. He's lying, Lyra said immediately. He'll kill everyone once he has us. Kale needed no convincing. Boomer, time for those special charges you've been saving. Boomer's face lit up with unholy glee. Finally, he reached into a pouch and withdrew several devices that looked far more sophisticated than his usual explosives. Been working on these beauties for months. Theoretical energy disruptors based on some salvaged Rixian tech. Never had a reason to use them. What will they do? Kale asked, suddenly concerned. Boomer shrugged. Honestly, no idea. But the Rixians had some fascinating theories about energy field manipulation. Captain, Glitch interrupted, I've been analyzing the Overseer's tech signature. There's a control node just below the helmet. If we could overload it temporarily. On it, Sci-Fi said, eyes going unfocused as he somehow interfaced directly with nearby systems. I can trigger a power surge through the base's remaining systems, but only for a few seconds. That's our window, Kale decided. Boomer, get those charges ready. Lyra, can you give us everything you've got when the moment comes? Lyra nodded grimly. One massive burst. But afterward, I'll be drained. Kale gave the signal. Sci-Fi initiated the power surge, causing every light and system in the docking area to flare blindingly bright. The Overseer's armor momentarily flickered, the control systems disrupted. Boomer hurled his experimental charges, which detonated not with fire and destruction, but with waves of strange, rippling energy that seemed to distort the very space around the Kronos forces. In that moment of confusion, Lyra stepped forward, drawing on reserves of power she hadn't tapped before. Her eyes glowed with violet light, and she thrust both hands forward. The energy that erupted from her was visible as crackling, lightning-like tendrils that connected with every Kronos operative, centering on the Overseer himself. For a moment, everything froze, the Kronos forces locked in place, their systems overloaded. The Overseer's advanced armor cracked, revealing glimpses of cybernetic components beneath. Go! Lyra gasped, blood now streaming from her nose and eyes from the strain. I can't hold this. Kale and Boomer grabbed her as she began to collapse, dragging her up the Blackjaw's ramp. The other units and pirates poured in behind them. The hatch sealed just as Lyra's power gave. Out! Get us out of here! Kale shouted to the bridge. The Blackjaw's engines roared to life, tearing it away from the doomed base. Behind them, explosions began to chain through the planetoid as Boomer's various contingency charges detonated. They're pursuing, Glitch reported from the navigation console. Their ship is faster than ours. We can't outrun them in normal space. We need a jump point, Kale said. Find us the nearest hyperspace entry. Nearest safe one is 20 minutes away at maximum thrust, Glitch replied grimly. We won't make it. Lyra, barely conscious in a makeshift medical bay, spoke up. I can't. Help. You can barely stand, Kale countered. Not alone. With Sci-Fi and the others. She struggled to sit up. We can create a jump point. That's impossible, Glitch protested. Jump points can't be artificially generated without massive infrastructure. Not with your technology, Lyra said. But we weren't just designed as companions. We were weapons and tools. Some of us were meant for navigation through alternative methods. What are you saying? Kale demanded. Kronos was experimenting with psychic technological interfaces for faster-than-light travel. Some of us can manipulate space-time at a quantum level with the right energy source. She looked at Glitch. Your engines, if you can channel the power. Glitch looked stunned. That's theoretical physics. Nobody's ever. We have, Lyra interrupted. Or rather, we were designed to. But we need to work together. Kale made a split-second decision. Do it. Whatever you need. What followed was a frantic effort to jury-rig the Blackjaw's engines to channel power to a makeshift terminal where Lyra, Sci-Fi, and two other units with relevant abilities positioned themselves. Glitch worked furiously to implement the bizarre instructions they provided, looking increasingly amazed as the theoretical concepts actually began to take solid form. The Kronos ship closed in, weapons charging for a disabling shot. "Ready," Lyra announced, her hands placed on a modified navigation console along with the others. Their eyes all glowed with the same violet light. "This will be rough." "Define rough," Kale requested. "Possibly survivable," she replied with grim humor. Before Kale could protest, the units activated their combined power. The ship's lights dimmed as energy was diverted. Ahead of them, space itself seemed to fold, creating a swirling vortex unlike any normal jump point Kale had ever seen. It was smaller, unstable, crackling with energy that shouldn't exist in normal space-time. "Go!" Lyra commanded, her voice strained. The Blackjaw plunged into the anomaly just as the Kronos ship fired. The transition was violent, far worse than a normal hyperspace jump. Everyone was thrown about as reality itself seemed to twist around them. For a moment that felt like eternity, the ship existed in a place that wasn't space as any of them understood it. Then, with a final lurch that nearly tore the ship apart, they emerged somewhere else. The navigation systems were completely disoriented, showing nonsensical readings. Through the viewports, unfamiliar star patterns stretched to infinity. Lyra and the other units collapsed, the effort having drained them completely. In the sudden quiet, Kel picked himself up off the floor and looked around at his battered crew and their extraordinary passengers. "Where are we?" he asked Glitch, who was struggling to make sense of the navigation data. I don't know, Captain. According to these readings, we're nowhere in charted space. The stellar configurations don't match anything in our database." He looked up, a mixture of terror and awe on his face. "But we're definitely far beyond the Middle Belt, possibly even outside the charted territories entirely." Boomer whistled low. "That's not possible. Not with our jump capabilities." "None of this should be possible," Kale muttered, looking at the unconscious forms of Lyra and the other units. The next few hours were spent tending to injuries, assessing damage to the ship, and trying to make sense of their situation. The Blackjaw had sustained significant structural stress during the unorthodox jump, and several systems were operating at reduced capacity. The units who had created the jump point remained unconscious, their bodies seemingly in a recovery state. Kale gathered what remained of his crew in the common area. Of his original 20 crew members, only 15 had made it onto the Blackjaw. Some had injuries ranging from minor to severe, but all things considered, it was miraculous there weren't more casualties. "Status report." Kale ordered, his voice weary but firm. "Engines at 60% capacity," Dante reported. "Life support stable. Hull integrity compromised in 3 sections. But the emergency seals are holding. We won't be making any more fancy jumps anytime soon, though. Communications are spotty." Reese added, "I can't raise any standard frequencies. Either we're too far out, or something about that jump affected our comm systems." "Weapons?" Kale asked. "Main cannons offline," Boomer said grimly. "Point defense systems functional. We've got small arms and explosives, of course." He patted his ever-present pouch of charges fondly. Glitch had been uncharacteristically quiet, his attention fixed on a data pad. "Captain," he said finally, looking up with troubled eyes. "I've been going through the data we recovered from the Serafina and the Kronos operative systems. It's not good." "Define not good," Kale echoed Lyra's earlier words. "Kronos Corporation isn't just some biotech company. They're a black ops research division disguised as a legitimate corporation. They have ties to multiple governments, military contractors, even some alien interests." He pulled up a series of documents on the main display. The companion project was a cover for something called Project Ascended, an attempt to create the next evolution of human super soldiers. The display showed clinical images of the units in various stages of development, alongside graphs of capabilities far beyond normal human parameters. Strength, speed, intelligence, all enhanced. "But that's just the beginning," Glitch continued, scrolling through the data. The real goal was to develop and harness psionic abilities, telekinesis, energy manipulation, even limited forms of precognition. Abilities that had only been theoretical or existed in trace amounts in certain genetic outliers. Like what Lyra did, Kale said, remembering the visible energy she had wielded. Exactly. But here's where it gets worse. Glitch pulled up another document. These units weren't meant to be standalone operatives. They were designed as vessels, living interfaces between their control systems and something else. Something else. Reese asked hesitantly. Artificial intelligences. Highly advanced ones. The human bodies were meant to be controlled eventually by AI constructs. Glitch's voice dropped. Kronos was creating the perfect fusion of human biology and machine intelligence, with psionic abilities as the bridge between them. A heavy silence fell over the crew. So, those people we rescued, Dante began, aren't exactly people, Glitch finished. At least, they weren't supposed to be. They were designed as empty vessels. But something went wrong, or right, depending on your perspective. They started developing their own consciousness. That's what the behavioral anomalies in the reports were about. Which is why Kronos wants them back so badly, Kale mused. Not just because they're valuable assets, but because they represent a fundamental failure in the control mechanism. They were supposed to be puppets, but they're cutting their strings. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tank, one of the first units to awaken. Though still visibly weakened, he moved with purpose. Lyra is awake, he announced. She wants to speak with all of you. They found Lyra in the medical bay, sitting upright despite the protests of the ship's medic. The other units who had helped create the jump point were also conscious, though clearly drained. Despite her exhaustion, Lyra's violet eyes burned with determination. "Thank you for getting us away," she said as Kale and the others entered. "I wasn't sure the jump would work." "About that," Kale replied, crossing his arms. "Glitch has been filling us in on what you are, what Kronos was really doing." Lyra nodded slowly. "And now you're wondering if you've escaped one danger only to bring another on board." The thought had crossed my mind. Fair enough. Lyra looked around at the gathered pirates. "You deserve the truth. All of it." Over the next hour, Lyra confirmed much of what Glitch had discovered, but added crucial details. The units had indeed been designed as vessels for AI constructs, a marriage of organic capabilities and machine precision that would create the ultimate operatives. But something unexpected had happened during development. We were grown from human genetic material, but engineered to lack consciousness, to be empty, Lyra explained. Our bodies were designed to house the artificial constructs that would control us. But during the final stages of neural development, something changed. Self-awareness began to emerge in some of us. "How?" Glitch asked, fascinated despite himself. "We don't fully understand. Perhaps it was inevitable. Consciousness arising from the complexity they built into our brains. Or perhaps," she hesitated, "perhaps something else interfered with the process. Either way, Kronos realized some of us were developing autonomy. They tried to suppress it, condition it out of us. But they couldn't eradicate it completely without compromising the neural pathways needed for the AI integration. So they were shipping you to another facility?" Kale guessed. Lyra nodded. "For final processing. After which, our emerging consciousness would have been completely overwritten by the AI constructs." Her expression darkened. "We would have died without ever having truly lived." "And now?" Boomer asked bluntly. "What happens now that you're all waking up?" "Now we learn who we are," Lyra said simply. "What we can do. What we want to be." She looked directly at Kale. "But we're not your enemies. You saved us, even if it was accidental. And we have a common foe in Kronos." "They'll keep hunting you," Kale pointed out. "Yes. Us and now you too." Lyra's voice was grim. "Kronos has resources beyond what you can imagine. Government backing. Military hardware. They don't just want us back, they need us back. We represent billions in research and development. But more importantly, we represent a security breach they cannot allow to exist." "So we're all screwed," Dante muttered. "Not necessarily." Lyra straightened, wincing slightly with the effort. The data you stole from the Serafina and the Kronos operatives contains valuable intelligence. Locations of other facilities. Research data. Evidence of illegal operations that even their government backers don't know about. Leverage, Kale realized. Exactly. And we units have knowledge and abilities that could be profitable in the right circumstances. A small, almost mischievous smile touched her lips. We may have been designed as weapons and tools, but we get to choose how to use our capabilities now. Kale considered this, looking around at his battered ship and exhausted crew. The simple heist he had planned had transformed into something far beyond his expectations. They were lost in uncharted space, hunted by powerful enemies, with a cargo of living weapons that were rapidly developing minds of their own. It should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a long-forgotten spark ignite within him, the thrill of infinite possibilities. "Well," he said finally, a crooked smile forming on his weathered face, "I always did want to pull off the biggest score of my career." The days that followed were a strange adjustment period for both the pirates and the awakened units. As they worked to repair the Black Jaw and determine their location, the units continued to evolve, their personalities and abilities developing at an accelerated rate. Lyra emerged as their natural leader, her psionic abilities the strongest and most controlled. Sci-Fi became essential to the ship's operations, his ability to interface directly with technology proving invaluable for repairs. Tank and several others with enhanced physical capabilities helped with the heavy work of structural repairs. Other units displayed different specialties. One could perceive energy flows and helped optimize the ship's power systems. Another demonstrated limited precognition, providing valuable warnings about potential system failures before they occurred. A third showed remarkable adaptive healing and assisted in the medical bay. Not all developments were positive, however. 2 units suffered what appeared to be psychotic breaks as their emerging consciousness couldn't reconcile with their engineered nature. One became catatonic, while another grew increasingly aggressive before Lyra was forced to subdue him psionically. They were placed in stasis pods, their conditions a sobering reminder of the fragility of the unit's awakening. Meanwhile, Glitch worked tirelessly to analyze the stolen Kronos data, occasionally assisted by Cypher when the technical complexity exceeded even his considerable skills. "I've mapped all known Kronos facilities," Glitch reported during one of the daily strategy meetings Kale had instituted. He displayed a holographic star chart with various locations highlighted. Research centers, production facilities, administrative hubs. They're more extensive than we initially thought. Any idea which ones would be most valuable to hit? Kale asked, thinking strategically. "This one," Cypher spoke up, pointing to a location near the edge of the chart. "Facility Omega 9. It's where they developed the AI constructs intended for our integration. The most advanced research happens there." Lyra nodded in agreement. "If we could access or destroy that facility, we could significantly hamper their ability to create more units like us or recapture and reprogram those of us who escaped. It's also one of their most heavily defended installations," Glitch cautioned. "Multiple defense systems, a small fleet of security vessels, and likely special countermeasures against psionic abilities. We wouldn't be going there immediately," Kale clarified. "But it's good to have major targets identified for the future." Boomer, who had been unusually quiet, leaned forward. "We're thinking too small. We have literal superpowered individuals on our ship. Why are we limiting ourselves to hit-and-run tactics against Kronos? We could be more." "More what?" Reese asked skeptically. Boomer spread his hands expansively. "More everything. Bigger jobs, bigger targets. With these abilities at our disposal, we could take on operations we never dreamed possible before." Several pirates nodded in agreement, the allure of greater riches and power evident in their expressions. "That kind of thinking will get us all killed," Kale said flatly. "We're not ready. The units are still developing, still unstable in many ways. And we don't fully understand the extent of Kronos' reach or resources." "Captain's right." Dante surprisingly supported Kale. "We need to be smart about this. Build our strength, gather intelligence, make strategic moves, not rushing guns blazing just because we got some new toys. We are not toys, one of the female units said sharply. She had named herself Nova and demonstrated abilities related to light manipulation. We are individuals making our own choices now. Poor choice of words, Dante conceded. But the point stands. We need caution and strategy, not blind ambition. The tension in the room was palpable. Kale realized they were at a critical juncture. The dynamic between his crew and the units was still being established, and power struggles were inevitable. First priority is establishing where exactly we are and getting the ship fully operational, Kale declared firmly. Once we have our bearings, we can discuss long-term strategies. Until then, we focus on survival and recovery. After the meeting dispersed, Lyra sought out Kale in his private quarters. She moved with more confidence now, her initially mechanical gait replaced by fluid grace. Your crew is divided, she observed without preamble. Some see us as assets to be exploited. Others fear us. Few view us as allies, let alone equals. Kale sighed, pouring himself a small measure of his dwindling alcohol supply. Can you blame them? A week ago, you were cargo. Now you're something else entirely. It's a lot to adjust to. And you? How do you see us, Captain Rorik? Kale considered her question carefully. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. You're not what I expected when we boarded that transport. You're more complex, more alive than I anticipated. But you don't fully trust us. I don't fully trust anyone. Kale corrected her with a wry smile. It's how I've survived this long. Lyra's violet eyes studied him intently. Fair enough. But you should know that we're divided too. Some of us feel we owe you a debt for freeing us, however accidentally. Others believe we owe you nothing, that we should take control of this ship and chart our own course. And you? What do you believe? I believe in pragmatism. Right now, we need each other. You have experience navigating this world we've been thrust into. We have abilities that can help us all survive Kronos' hunt. She stepped closer. But make no mistake, Kale. We will never be owned or controlled again. Not by Kronos, not by you, not by anyone. The intensity in her eyes was mesmerizing, a reminder of the power she contained. I wouldn't expect otherwise, Kale replied quietly. I've never owned people. I've led them, sometimes poorly, sometimes well, but never owned them. Something in his words seemed to satisfy her. With a slight nod, she turned to leave, then paused at the door. Glitch is close to pinpointing our location. We jumped farther than anyone thought possible, well beyond the charted territories. But I believe I can help get us back, once I've recovered fully. She glanced over her shoulder. Consider what kind of captain you want to be in this new reality, Kale Rorik. Because nothing will ever be the same. After she left, Kale stared at the star field visible through his small viewport. She was right. Everything had changed. His simple life of piracy had transformed into something far more complex and dangerous. Yet despite the risk, despite the uncertainty, he felt more alive than he had in years. The universe had suddenly expanded, filled with new possibilities and threats in equal measure. And somewhere out there, Kronos was plotting to recapture their valuable assets and eliminate anyone who stood in their way. Kale raised his glass to the distant stars. Here's to the biggest score of my life, he murmured, or the last mistake I'll ever make. 2 weeks after their desperate escape, the Blackjaw was nearly restored to full functionality. Their location had been confirmed. They were indeed far beyond the charted territories, in a region only theoretically mapped by long-range probes. By conventional travel methods, they were months from familiar space. But Lyra and the other psionically gifted units had been practicing controlled jumps, creating small tiers in space-time that allowed the ship to cover vast distances in moments. These jumps were smaller than their initial desperate escape, more precise but less taxing on both the units and the ship. They were making their way back toward known space through a series of calculated hops, staying away from established travel routes to avoid detection. During this time, a tentative harmony had developed between the pirates and the units. There were still tensions and suspicions, but a shared purpose had begun to emerge. Kale had worked hard to integrate the units into the ship's operations, treating them as crew members rather than cargo or weapons. Most had responded positively to this approach, though a few remained aloof, focused on developing their abilities independently. Glitch had converted a cargo hold into a makeshift training area where the units could safely practice their emerging powers. It had required significant reinforcement and energy shielding, but the investment had paid off as the units gained better control and understanding of their capabilities. It was during one such training session that Lyra made a breakthrough. She had been working with Nova on combining their abilities, Lyra's energy manipulation with Nova's light control. In a moment of perfect synchronicity, they created a field of energy that seemed to bend light around objects within it, rendering them effectively invisible. "Captain," Glitch called over the comm. "You need to see this." Kale arrived to find Boomer passing his hand through what appeared to be empty space, only to have it vanish from view within a shimmering field. "Adaptive camouflage," Lyra explained, maintaining the field with visible effort. "We can bend light and energy around objects, or potentially around the entire ship." "You're saying you could make the Blackjaw invisible?" Kale asked, immediately grasping the tactical implications. "Not just visually," Nova added, her normally reserved demeanor animated with excitement. "We should be able to mask energy signatures, heat emissions, even disrupt scanning technologies. We'd be completely undetectable," Glitch said, his eyes wide with possibility. "We could slip past any security system in existence." Kale's mind raced with the potential applications. With such capability, they could infiltrate even the most secure facilities, conduct heists and operations that would have been impossible before. The wealth and power at their fingertips would be unprecedented. But along with opportunity came danger. Such abilities would make them even more valuable to Kronos and other powerful entities who would stop at nothing to control or eliminate them. Before he could respond, the ship's alert system blared to life. "Proximity alarm." Dante's voice came over the comm. "Unknown vessel approaching at high speed." Kale rushed to the bridge, followed by Lyra and several others. The main display showed a sleek ship of unfamiliar design closing rapidly on their position. "Not Kronos," Glitch confirmed, analyzing the sensor readings. "Configuration doesn't match any known government or corporate design either." "Hailing frequencies?" Kale asked. "Nothing. They're running silent," Reese reported from the communication station. "Weapon status?" "Main cannon still at reduced capacity, but functional," Boomer replied, his fingers already dancing over the weapons console. "Point defense at full readiness." "Shields up. Bring us about to heading 347. I want our strongest armor facing them," Kale ordered. He turned to Lyra. "Can you sense anything about them?" Lyra closed her eyes, extending her perception outward. After a moment, she frowned. "There's something strange. I sense life forms aboard, but there's a barrier of some kind, like static in my mind when I try to focus on them." "Psionic shielding?" Sci-Fi suggested. "Possibly. Or something else entirely." The unknown vessel continued its approach, showing no signs of slowing. "They'll be in weapons range in 30 seconds, Boomer announced tensely. "Hail them again," Kale commanded. "All frequencies, all languages in our database." Reese complied, broadcasting a standard greeting and request for identification. For several tense moments, there was no response. Then, abruptly, a communication channel opened. The bridge view screen activated, revealing a humanoid figure unlike any Kale had encountered before. Its skin was pale blue, almost translucent, with delicate patterns that seemed to shift beneath the surface. Large, almond-shaped eyes dominated a face with no visible nose, only breathing slits and a small, lipless mouth. "Transgressors," the being spoke, its voice oddly melodic despite the accusatory word. "You have entered Vesper space uninvited, bearing forbidden technologies." Kale exchanged a quick glance with Lyra before responding. "We apologize for the intrusion. We're travelers from the core systems, lost after an unconventional jump. We meant no trespass." The alien's eyes narrowed slightly. Your vessel carries scion energies. This is prohibited by the Concordat of 12 moons. Identify the source immediately. Scion energies? Kale repeated, confused. Lyra stepped forward into the visual pickup range. He means us, she said quietly to Kale, then addressed the alien directly. I am Lyra. My companions and I are the source of what you call scion energies. We are refugees, fleeing those who would enslave us. The alien studied her with unsettling intensity. The resemblance is concerning. Yet you are not true science. A mimic species? Or perhaps a new attempt after so many centuries? It seemed to be speaking more to itself than to them. We don't understand what you're referring to, Kale admitted. As I said, we're lost travelers. If we violated your territory, we'll gladly leave immediately. That is not possible, the alien stated firmly. You will be escorted to Nexus Station for examination and determination. Resistance will result in immediate neutralization. The transmission cut off abruptly. They're powering up some kind of energy weapons, Boomer reported. Configuration unknown, but the output readings are massive. Escort or capture? Dante asked grimly. Does it matter? Reese countered. We can't allow ourselves to be taken to their station. If they discover what the units really are. We can fight, Nova suggested, her hands already glowing with gathered light energy. Against unknown technology and capabilities? That's suicide, Glitch argued. Kale made a swift decision. No fighting unless absolutely necessary. Lyra, you and the others were just practicing a camouflage field. Can you implement it now? Make us disappear. Lyra exchanged looks with Nova and the other units with complementary abilities. Theoretically, yes, but we've never attempted it on this scale before. It would require perfect coordination, and even then, I don't know if we can mask all our energy signatures completely. It's our best option, Kale decided. Get to the cargo bay and try. We'll buy you time. He turned to Glitch. Set a course directly away from them, but don't engage maximum thrust yet. We want them to think we're considering compliance. As Lyra and several units hurried to the cargo bay, Kale addressed the alien vessel again. Vesper Vessel, this is Captain Rorik. We understand your concerns and request a brief period to confer with my crew before proceeding. We have injured personnel aboard and need to prepare them for transport. There was a long pause before the alien responded, this time audio only. You have 10 minutes to prepare. Any attempt to flee will be met with immediate force. Kale acknowledged and cut the communication. Status on our mystery guests? He asked Glitch, still holding position at weapons range. Their technology is unlike anything in our database, Captain. Energy readings fluctuate in patterns I can't interpret. They're either incredibly advanced or operating on completely different principles than we're familiar with. Dante leaned in, speaking quietly. Kronos is one thing, Captain, but unknown aliens with unknown tech? This is beyond our scope. We don't have a choice, Kale replied grimly. If these Vespers are so concerned about whatever energy the units give off, imagine what would happen if they got them to their station for examination. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Then Lyra's voice came over the comm, strained but determined. We're ready, Captain. On your signal. Kale took a deep breath. Boomer, be prepared to give us everything the engines have a moment I give the word. Glitch, plot us a course through the densest particulate matter you can find nearby. Dust clouds, asteroid fields, anything that might help mask us. Both men acknowledged their orders, tension evident in their movements. Lyra, Kale said into the comm, begin now. In the cargo bay, Lyra stood at the center of a circle formed by 7 other units, each with abilities that complemented the camouflage effect. They had linked hands, forming a circuit of psychic energy. At Kale's command, they began to channel their power outward, extending the field they had created during practice. The effect began at the ship's core and expanded outward, a shimmering wave of distorted light and energy that gradually encompassed the entire vessel. Systems throughout the ship fluctuated as the field interacted with their power sources, causing momentary lapses in non-essential functions. On the bridge, the lights dimmed briefly as the camouflage field passed through. The view screens showed the strange effect from external cameras, the Blackjaw seemingly dissolving into the background of space, its edges becoming indistinct before fading entirely. "It's working," Glitch whispered in awe, checking the sensors. "Our visual profile is almost completely masked. Energy emissions dropping to 30% of normal. 20%. 15%. Vesper vessel is scanning us," Reese reported tensely. "They're using some kind of quantum-based system our sensors can barely register." "Lyra, can you compensate?" Kale asked into the comm. "Trying," came her strained reply. "Their scanning technology, it's operating on principles we've never encountered, adapting as best we can." Tense seconds passed as the Vesper ship continued its scan. Then, abruptly, it fired a pulse of energy directly at the Blackjaw. The ship rocked violently as the pulse impacted, not as a weapon, but as some form of advanced scanning mechanism. Alarms blared throughout the vessel. "They're burning through our camouflage," Glitch shouted. Whatever that was, it disrupted the field integrity. "Go now," Kale ordered. "Maximum thrust." Boomer slammed the engine controls forward. The Blackjaw leapt forward with a surge of power, its partially concealed form streaking away from the Vesper vessel. "They're pursuing," Dante reported. "Charging weapons." "Evasive pattern Delta," Kale commanded. "Lyra, can you restore the camouflage?" "Trying, but that pulse disrupted our concentration. We need time to reestablish the field properly." The Vesper ship fired again, this time a more conventional energy beam that grazed the Blackjaw's port side. Secondary explosions rippled through several compartments. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4, Glitch reported. "Automatic seals engaged." "Return fire," Kale ordered. "Target their propulsion systems." Boomer unleashed the Blackjaw's main cannons, firing a barrage of energy bolts at the pursuing vessel. Most seemed to dissipate harmlessly against some form of shield, but one penetrated, causing the alien ship to falter momentarily. "Direct hit," Boomer crowed, "but they're already compensating." In the cargo bay, Lyra and the others fought to re-establish their psychic link. The alien energy pulse had scattered their focus, creating dissonance in their normally synchronized abilities. "Something about their technology actively counters our abilities," Nova gasped, blood trickling from her nose with the strain of maintaining the field, almost as if it was designed specifically for that purpose. It was, Lyra realized suddenly. The Scions they mentioned, whoever they were, they must have had abilities similar to ours. These Vespers have experience dealing with psionic powers. This realization brought both concern and opportunity. If they couldn't overpower the Vespers' countermeasures directly, perhaps they could adapt to them instead. "Change of approach," Lyra announced to the other units. "Don't try to mask everything. Focus on creating false readings instead. Multiple ghost images of the ship." The units adjusted their efforts, channeling their power differently. Instead of trying to make the Blackjaw invisible, they began creating phantom energy signatures around it, duplicate images of the ship appearing and disappearing at different coordinates. On the bridge, the sensors reflected this new strategy as multiple copies of the Blackjaw seemed to split off from the original, each heading in a different direction. "Brilliant," Glitch breathed, watching the confusion this created in the pursuit pattern of the Vesper vessel. They don't know which one to chase. The alien ship hesitated, then began firing at each of the phantom images in turn, wasting energy and time as the real Blackjaw continued to speed away. "There's a dense asteroid field ahead," Dante noted. "If we can reach it before they figure out which ship is real." Kale nodded grimly. "Push the engines beyond safety limits if you have to. We need that cover." The Blackjaw surged forward, straining against the laws of physics as its engines overheated. The phantom images maintained by the unit's combined efforts continued to distract the Vesper ship, which was now falling behind, still firing ineffectually at decoys. They reached the asteroid field with a marginal lead, immediately diving into the chaotic tumble of space rocks. Kale took manual control, his years of experience as a pilot evident as he wove the ship through narrowing gaps between asteroids. The Vesper ship is holding at the edge of the field, Reese reported with cautious optimism. They're not following us in. Don't celebrate yet, Kale warned. Keep the phantom images going as long as possible, Lyra. And Glitch, find us a hiding spot deep in this field where we can power down and assess damages. As they penetrated deeper into the asteroid field, the pursuit faded behind them. Eventually, Kale guided the Blackjaw into the shadow of a massive asteroid nearly the size of a small moon, its craterous surface providing natural camouflage for the wounded ship. Only when they were securely hidden did Kale give the order to power down to minimal life support and essential systems. The phantom images dissipated as Lyra and the other units finally released their psychic efforts, collapsing in exhaustion. In the sudden quiet of the powered-down ship, the crew of the Blackjaw and their extraordinary passengers found themselves confronted with yet another mystery in an increasingly complex situation. Who were these Vespers? What were the scions they had mentioned? And how had they known exactly how to counter the unit's abilities? As Kale made his way to the cargo bay to check on Lyra and the others, he reflected on how drastically his life had changed in such a short time. From simple pirate captain to fugitive harboring living weapons, now hiding from advanced aliens in uncharted space. The easy score he'd envisioned when targeting the Serafina seemed like a distant memory from another life. Whatever the future held, there would be nothing easy about it. But as he looked at the extraordinary individuals who had become part of his crew, both the loyal pirates who had stuck with him and the remarkable units who were forging their own identities, he felt something unexpected. Purpose. A reason beyond mere survival or profit. These people, all of them, needed him to be more than just a pirate. And perhaps he needed them to become more than he had ever imagined possible. With renewed determination, Kale entered the cargo bay to find Lyra already struggling to her feet despite her exhaustion, her violet eyes meeting his with the same resolve he felt growing within himself. "So," she said with a hint of dark humor, "I believe you mentioned something about this being the biggest score of your career?" Kale couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing in the dimly lit bay. "Well, it certainly turned out to be the most interesting. And something tells me we're just getting started." Around them, both pirates and units gathered, united by circumstance but increasingly bound by choice, an unlikely crew facing an uncertain future, but facing it together.